slogans denouncing Israel's action in Gaza. On the other side, in Tel Aviv, thousands of Israelis marched demanding immediate release of the hostages held by Hamas. Hundreds also gathering outside Prime Minister Netanyahu's official residence, calling on the Israeli leader to resign in the wake of the October 7th Hamas attack. Meantime, the UN's World
have a lot of leverage in this conflict and can have a lot of effect on it. Both, I think, are signaling that they do not want this to escalate into a wider regional war.
On Monday, the health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza claimed the Palestinian death toll passed 10,000. The ministry doesn't distinguish between fighters and civilians.
Boris Johnson and former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison visited a kibbutz near the Gaza Strip yesterday that was attacked by Hamas terrorists on October the 7th.
Protect themselves against brutal killers.
Those expressions of hate and against Jewish people, this is what it becomes, what we're seeing around us here today. That's why it can't be tolerated in its most smallest form, because it starts as a mustard seed and it grows into this horror.
Johnson said the world needs to recognize that a massive crime has been committed by Hamas, and that Israel now has to find the perpetrators and to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. Germany's
Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told air and ground crews at an Air Force base in southern Israel Sunday a ceasefire was completely out of the question.
We say it to our enemies and to our friends, and we'll simply carry on until we win. We don't have an alternative.
Israel's military said Sunday ground troops from its 36th Division moved into positions along the Gaza coast to encircle and strike Hamas forces. The IDF says soldiers hit around 50 targets and eliminated terrorists in close-quarter combat. It stated targets as operational residences, outposts, tunnels, and other military positions. The IDF released footage of rocket launch sites uncovered during the advance in a residential area of Beit Hanun.
We can see that there is a playground which used to be some kind of small amusement park, and within it a launch site. We assessed that somewhere in here there is also some form of underground infrastructure. Now we will enter the site and expose the tunnels.
The IDF also exposed a network of Hamas tunnels, command centers, and rocket launchers beneath and next to hospitals in northern Gaza, and put forth evidence showing how the terrorist organization uses hospitals as cover and prevents civilians from leaving combat zones.
They launch rockets on Israel 75 meters from an hospital. Why? They know precisely.
IDF says some 800 rockets fired from Gaza at Israel during the war have fallen short and killed many Palestinians. The Israeli army says it opened a humanitarian corridor south for evacuations out of the war zone. It released videos of the route and a message in Arabic asking residents to leave. The IDF says it has sent over 4 million SMS messages, 6 million voice messages, and dropped pamphlets from the sky urging civilians in the north to get out.
More than 1.5 million. We've done almost 20,000 live phone calls.
Iran-backed terrorist group Hezbollah attacked Israeli positions along Lebanon's border on Sunday with guided missiles, drones, and other weapons. Hezbollah says it fired a barrage of Grad rockets out of town in response to an Israeli strike on a car in South Lebanon. It's the first time the terrorist group has used the weapon since the war began, sparking concerns of escalation. Israel says it carries strikes out based on intelligence information, and that the vehicle was identified and suspected as a transport for terrorists.
Anyone who threatens us, we will attack them. And every event, of course, that occurs in Lebanon, we examine it and learn about it to understand the details.
Israeli security forces say a limited pause in fighting for a few hours could be considered, but that it would depend on the circumstances on the ground. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
TikTok's influence on young people in the U.S.
Colonel Darren Gobb, thank you for joining us again. On Sunday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Israel, Jordan, and Ramallah, the de facto capital of the West Bank. From what you saw, what was the main intent of this trip?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's good to be joining you again. And from what I could understand of this trip, which is always seems to be a challenge, he's trying to really avoid having this conflict grow bigger. And we've seen it already creep into the northern part of Israel and in Lebanon, and specifically Hezbollah. And as we grow our forces around the region, I think he's really trying to do whatever he can to show solidarity between Israel and the United States, keep it from growing bigger than it necessarily needs to be, and specifically keep the larger state actors out of it, like Iran, like your Jordan, and maybe Saudi Arabia and others. So we'll see where it goes. I'm not confident that his message is being well received, though.
Okay. And while he was there, he made an unannounced trip to Iraq. What's the significance of this move during this sort of whirlwind trip he made to the Middle East?
Well, first of all, I think one of the things we got to remind ourselves is we have U.S. soldiers and other service members throughout Syria and Iraq still. In Iraq, we're there at the government's invitation. In Syria, we are not, but we're there anyways. And so I think he's trying to make sure he talks to these national leaders and about the fact that our forces are there, that they're at risk, and making sure that even though the best answer is to take them out and bring them home, that they've accounted for their security within the Iraqi armed forces. Look at Turkey as an example with Incirlik Air Base and the crowds coming at the American base there. That could easily happen to bases all across the Middle East.
And as Israel retaliates against Hamas, tensions are obviously rising, like you've been saying, in the Middle East. We're hearing reports of violence in the West Bank. What's going on there?
Well, this is expected growth of a sort when it comes to what started in Gaza, going into the West Bank through people who are sympathetic to what's happening to Gaza specifically, aligning with the Palestinians and Hamas or wherever their sympathies lie. So the West Bank is a natural result, or any violence there is a natural result of what's going on in Gaza, and then also to the north in Lebanon and the Golan Heights region.
Blinken, while he was there, hinted at the Palestinian Authority playing a role in Gaza's future if Hamas is defeated. What is the Palestinian Authority's track record?
Well, their track record's terrible. They've sacrificed the people in the Gaza Strip in pursuit of a fundamentalist religious aim of destroying Israel in whatever means they can. So I hope in the end that Israel will recognize that.
TikTok is the #1 app for the Gen Zs in this country. That's where they get their information, their news. Well, it's a Chinese app, right? Everything that they get leads them in the direction that the Chinese want them to go. And they will be influencing the election on TikTok. I believe that's what happened before. Influencing by a foreign entity, getting people to go the direction they want them to go in. Think about that for a few minutes, folks.
Now show that the Chinese social media platform is pushing anti-Israel posts, possibly strengthening support for Hamas in the U.S. Congressman Mike Gallagher wrote in an op-ed a few days ago saying many young Americans support Hamas because of TikTok. He cited a poll stating that over half of college-aged Americans say Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7th were justified. He wrote in the article for the Free Press that, quote, a growing number of Americans rely on TikTok for their news. Today, TikTok is the top search engine for more than half of Gen Z. Official numbers from TikTok show that pro-Palestinian posts are getting over 10 times more views than on the platform
should be
pro-Israel posts. And the congressman
abolished.
Quote, we know for a fact that the CCP
eliminated
uses TikTok to push its propaganda and censor views that diverge from the party line. He concluded by saying that completely banning TikTok in the U.S., quote, protects our public square from the surveillance and maligns influence, censorship, and propaganda of a foreign adversary. A reporter spoke with an expert on Chinese propaganda to learn more about TikTok's influence on America's youth. Make sure to tune in to the Capitol Report at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific for the full report. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders speaks out during a CNN interview on the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict and where he stands on a ceasefire. Here's what he said.
So I think clear to most people, what Hamas did, and Hamas is an awful terrorist organization, is they slaughtered 1,400 people in cold blood. Israel has a right to defend itself. But what Israel does not, in my view, have a right to do is to kill thousands and thousands of innocent men, women, and children who had nothing to do with that attack.
While acknowledging the right of Israel to defend itself, Sanders also underscores the need to protect innocent civilians. But at the same time, Sanders is pushing back against calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. He pointed to Hamas's dedication to turmoil, chaos, and the destruction of the state of Israel. Notably, Sanders, who is Jewish, emphasizes that even Arab countries understand the need to neutralize Hamas and believe that a ceasefire won't aid the cause. Former President Trump takes the stand
in elections because who wins matters. Whether it's your school board member or your congressman or your governor or your state representative, these matter. And we're in a war for the future of America. And one side's fighting. The question is our side going to stand up and fight too?
Representative Randy Fine, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.